related to the presentations, it would be worth just going around my screen to introduce ourselves. So I'll start. So I'm Alex Marsh. I'm the independent chair of this board. I'm the rest of the time I'm Professor of Public Policy at the University of Bristol. And going around my screen, Councillor Classic.
Hi, Councillor Sarah Classic, Hengrove Whitchurch Park.
Liz.
Hi, good evening. Liz Cheetham, Resident Engagement Team Leader.
Sorry, yes, I forgot two Liz. Yes. Alison.
Hi, I'm Alison Napper. I'm Asset Strategy Manager for Bristol.
Thank you. Pete Dorr.
Hi, I'm Pete Dorr. I'm the Deputy Chair of this board, and I also represent this board on the Housing, Homes and Communities Board as part of the One City Plan.
Great, thank you. Philip.
Hello, my name's Philip Morris. I'm a resident of Bedminster.
Thanks, Philip. Donald?
Donald Graham, Director of Homes and Landlords and Services for Bristol City Council. Good evening, everybody.
Thanks, Donald. Liz Dewing, sorry.
Hi, yep, Liz Dewing, Project Manager. I've been responsible for running with the allocations review.
Thanks, Liz. We'll be hearing from Liz later on. Councillor Denier.
Was that me, sorry?
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, hi, Councillor Carla Denier, not Denier, Councillor for Clifton Down Ward.
Thank you. Sarah Spicer.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Sarah Spicer, Business Innovation Manager in Housing.
And thanks, Nigel.
Nigel Varley, tenant at Gilton House in Brislington. Just to make the point, there seems to be 2 Indians here and everybody else are chiefs. I think it's only me and Philip so far are actual tenants.
And Pete Dorr.
I'm a tenant as well, Nigel, just to clarify. Sorry, I should have said that.
And Councillor Dyer.
Hi, I'm Tony Dyer, Councillor for Southwood Ward.
Councillor Reynard.
Hi everyone, Councillor Tom Reynard, also Cabinet Member for Housing Delivery and Homes.
And coming down to the side, so I've got Christine. Christine Jory, who's another tenant member.
Your microphone's muted.
Yeah, I think you're on
Christine,
mute.
You're on mute at the moment, Christine. Yeah.
Right, I think I've sorted it.
You have?
A new app. Putting a meeting on a new app doesn't help. So I'm Christine Jory. I'm a tenant living at Redfield St George.
That's great. Thank you. Siba Cisse.
Hi, tenants here in Hot Wells.
That's great. And Adam.
Hi, I'm Adam Postons. I'm the one of the local democracy reporters based at the Post.
Thanks very much. And then finally, Jeremy.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Nivitt from Democratic Services. I'm clerking the meeting.
So that's us today. Thank you very much. Jeremy, apologies for absence.
Yes, we've had apologies from Richard Eddy, Peter Edwards, and also Paul Goggin, whose mother is ill, unfortunately, so he's had to give his apologies. And I think also Paul Sylvester, who I think may have been scheduled to attend, has declined the meeting, so I'm assuming he's also unable to attend as well.
Okay, Sarah, did you want to come in on that point? Or
just to add that Paul and Liz Dewing were both invited, so Liz is will be presenting that particular item.
Okay, thank you. Great. So for those who were there, minutes of the previous meeting, which was held way back on the 30th of May. Some of us were there. Some of us I don't think were. For those who were there, is there anything there in terms of the record of the meeting that you'd like to query or clarify? Or does that look like it covers what we discussed? Okay. In terms of actions, should we very quickly run through that? So I'm on page 8. Several issues raised under matter rising, social housing cluster regarding local engagement. Action was completed after meetings. We'll take that one. Clarification of certain complaints around Northfield House. Philip shared details. Sarah.
So I was looking back to see whether or not Phil did contact me after that meeting, and I can't find anything. Phil, can you recall if you got in contact after the last housing management board? It was back in May.
I know. Well, I've had a stroke. I've had another stroke since, so my memory's not very good. But we still, I talked to residents in Northfield, and they've still got problems. More so now because of Twinell House. We've got problems of people riding these electric scooters through the hallway and into the lifts, and especially in Berrycroft. But I can't remember, honestly.
Okay.
Because like Peter, I've been in hospital. I was in hospital for 4 days with another stroke.
I'm really sorry to hear that. You've got my contact details. If there's anything you'd like me to follow up on outside of the meeting, then just drop me a line and we can have that conversation, okay?
Yeah,
okay. Thanks for that. Tony, did you want to come in on that? Tony Dyer?
Yeah, just very briefly, because Philip lives in my ward. We also have had a few other tenants get in touch with us with problems about Northfield House. So I'll chase up on that as well and drop you a line, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay, so quick coming down the list. Sarah, to talk to Councillor Reynard around Homes and Communities Board. I presume that's moved forwards.
That has moved forward. Yes, and I think there has been another meeting since that date.
And you've got the next couple of actions also full to you, I think. Sarah, new housing officer, only work part-time, redirects.
Alex, sorry, can I jump in?
Yep.
Sorry, Sarah. As part of that meeting, I pointed out that I've previously been elected to represent this board on the Homes and Communities Board, and since the change to the current chair, have not been invited to the meetings. That was one of the points to follow up on, which hasn't resulted in my receiving an invite. It's now over 18 months since we were invited to the Homes and Communities Board. That was the concern I raised at the last meeting. And even though the board has, as you say, met since, I continue not to have been invited. Obviously, as a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Housing, like Alex, I do take exception to that. It is disrespectful treatment. Can you follow up on it?
I'll follow up on it, Pete, tomorrow.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Cheers, Tom.
We'll get that resolved.
Okay, thank you. Requested about additional information requested regarding analysis of complaints. That's ticked off the list, I think. We've had that one round. So coming down to the bottom of page 9, and so another Northfield House question. Northfield House, no notification of allocation rules, significant social disorder to be investigated. Sarah?
Yeah, so again, I think that was one where Phil was going to provide me with some information, but I didn't get any follow up to that. So again, Phil, if you have information about particular issues, then share those with me and I will follow them up.
Sorry, can I just say, Chair, could you email me, Sarah, because my writing's not right. I can't make notes, you know, the stroke affected me.
I will do. I'll drop you a line tomorrow, Phil, and then you'll have my email address and we can follow up on those issues.
Okay.
All right.
So turn around the initiation, Sarah, and if you can pick up. Liz Cheetham, you want to come in there?
Oh, hi, Alex. I was just going to say we've got some messages in the chat as well from CBCC.
Okay. Yes, I got in touch and you referred me to the housing person at Halson Drive, but they haven't responded or moved the conversation forward regarding communal space and garden space. So that feels like something to be followed up. Something was initiated but didn't proceed. So can we pick up on that as well? Who should I leave that with? Can I leave that in your plate, Sarah? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll go back to the team and one of the managers there.
Okay, and then at the bottom of page 11, the next action is the Director for Homes and Landlord Services agreed to raise comments made directly with Gorham Homes and where appropriate, work more closely with them. That was around investment, I think.
Sorry, Alex, I missed the first part. Did it say who was to pick that up?
Is that a question or an observation, Alex?
So we've got business innovation manager officers to reflect on the points about Halston Drive, but that's the one that CISO just raised in the chat. So the next one is the Director of Homes and Landlord Services agreed to raise the comments made directly with Gorham Homes and where appropriate work more closely with them. So Donald, is there any update on
Yeah,
on that?
the strategic oversight for Gorham Homes and its development has been handed over to myself as part of a changes in the council organisation. So it means as part of that process, I have regular meetings with Stephen Baker, who leads on Gorham Homes, and also their business plan comes through myself and others in the council for approval, which will involve Councillor Reinhardt and Councillor Sheeny. And so what we now have in place through housing is direct oversight of Gorham Homes in myself.
Okay. Thank you. So I think we can take that off the list as an action completed. So shall we move on to, I think that's all the outstanding actions. Just in terms.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I think that the matter regarding Gorham Homes was also regarding the social value that they use is not similar to Bristol City Council's social value. So the council uses TOMS and it's got, you know, equalities with it, it's got sustainability, and I forgot the third strand. And I think now the city is working on a cultural strand. So, you know, and also looking at the city centre development, temporary quarter development using the TOMS framework and kind of moving that conversation forward. Whereas Gorham's Homes, part of the council's arm, is not using the same social value measurement. So it will be useful if they actually utilize the same measurement. So at some point, we'll be able to see an impact report on the city's social value implementation. A recent report just came out from SCAPE, who's a construction body working with a number of construction developers. And from the report, £28 million is said to have been spent within the Southwest. That only equates to 2% of SCAPE's contracts or delivery partners. And within that 28 million, you know, if the council could actually pull a report that shows us how they've utilized the social value amongst the many developments that are taking place, that would be very useful to see. But having had a conversation with the social value team, it's quite clear that, you know, the impact or the potential of the TOMS framework has not been captured. So it's really hard to demonstrate the value that the social value elements is actually implemented.
Thanks for that. Donald, do you want to come back on that point?
Yeah.
Okay,
every capital project. Sorry, somebody's still speaking.
Sorry, I'm just catching up on previous.
Donald, go for it.
Yeah, every capital project that the council approves has to go through a capital investment board, and as part of our procurement process, whether it's Gorham Homes or anybody else, we ask for a social value statement to be made as part of that contractual process. And then obviously it's the duty of the council to monitor the output of that. Now, in Gorham Homes, that will be measured in terms of affordable homes, infrastructure addition, and local employment in very broad terms. So Gorham Homes should be in a position to demonstrate the added social value it brings to the city as an arm's length company wholly owned by the council. I can double check that particular example cited, £28 million contract, but their requirement to add social value to the city is no different from any other contractor that works for the city, or is commissioned by the city, I should say.
Tom Reinhardt.
I think the other bit of what I was hearing from Lucia's question there as well is why Gorham aren't using the TOMS framework in particular. So I think it'd be good to just pick that up.
So it was a sort of methodology question as well, in the sense that are they measuring in the same sort of basis? So there's some using the same tool, I think, was also part of the query, I think. Is there an advantage in that to sort of create greater comparability in terms of how the resources are allocated if they're using the same tool to make that assessment? I think that was also part of it was just a question, I guess, to be explored. Okay. So in terms of item 3, the public forum, as I understand it, we didn't receive any questions under that item for this meeting.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so in which case we should move on to item 4 on fire safety, and this is primarily an item for updating the boards. So who'd like to introduce that? We don't have a paper, but we have a presentation, I believe.
Yeah, that's right, Alex, and that's me doing that.
Okay, thank you, Alison.
Hi. So I've got a presentation, a few slides, just to kind of outline a bit of background around fire safety, what's happened over the last year and the significant changes, and also the current position and what our proposals are moving forward. I don't know how this normally works, Alex, but I'm more than happy to take questions as we go along or wait to the end. It's fine with everybody. I don't mind which.
Okay.
Can you see the?
We can see it in your view. Yeah, it's not in presentation view at the minute, but we can see the screen, I think.
So just bear with me. Is that okay in that view? Or would you rather it like that?
That's fine.
It's better. It's a bit bigger.
Is that
Bigger
better?
is better.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Bigger
good.
is better. Okay. So that means I can't see you. So if you'd be kind enough to let me know if anyone's got their hand up and wants to stop me.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Thank
Yep.
you. Thank you. So, like I said, a bit of background. Sort of pre all the changes that happened last year, we've taken fire safety in our homes in Bristol very seriously, and we've been investing significantly in our blocks in particular for the last 10 years, more than 10 years, and it's an average of £2.5 million a year. We prioritise works to high-rise blocks because it was known back then, and it's certainly been reinforced with the new building safety legislation that high-rise blocks present higher risk. And we sort of prioritised high-rise blocks, which we defined as 6 stories and above. And we prioritised replacement fire doors to make sure that they seal the smoke and the fire for at least 30 minutes, and compartmentation, which means that each flat, the smoke and the fire shouldn't spread between flats in blocks. So all those works have been complete in high-rise blocks, and we're working our way through low-rise blocks. We've got 62 high-rise blocks in Bristol and around 450 low-rise blocks. And within about 2 years, we'll have completed all that work across all the blocks in Bristol. Excuse me. We've also got up-to-date fire risk assessments for every block, and these are undertaken annually for high-rise, every 2 years for low-rise, and every 3 years for what we call house type blocks, where it's a house split into 2 flats with a communal area. So if there's any block of any type that has a communal area, we need to do a fire risk assessment. So we've got those for each and every block. After Grenfell, if you remember the awful tragedy at Grenfell Tower, we weren't part of the government's testing regime. We've never had ACM cladding that was on Grenfell that was considered very risky at the time, but we undertook independent assessments of some of our high-rise blocks with the oldest type of cladding, just to give us information about safety, a holistic assessment of the safety of the block, and what remedial action we needed to do to address any risks. And I think it's fair to say that over this time, we've established a really good working relationship with Avon Fire and Rescue Service, who have supported us with our policies and our approach and our communications with residents. So that's a bit of background.
Can I ask if you want questions dealt slide by slide, or wait till the end?
Up to you, Nigel. I don't mind.
Well, if you go back to that slide, yeah, there are a couple of problems. First of all, you said that by 2022 you'd achieved a situation where smoke wouldn't spread up the blocks. That's not correct. You'll find certainly in our block and probably in other, there are events that will take in the shaft that takes all the pipes and services up. There are events that will spread smoke from a fire into flats. That's been pointed out both to council officers and the fire brigade, who said, "Oh, we didn't know about that." Secondly, Yeah.
Sorry, Nigel. Can I just ask about that first point about vents? I know that you raised this at the resident engagement event at Gilton House, and that was taken away. Have you had a response to that?
Nope.
Right. Okay.
Because basically, secondly, with the fire risk assessment, and again, you probably hear me going about this. Tenants aren't made aware of this. I've seen the one for Gilton House. There are loads of things on there which tenants would have questioned had they seen it. And there doesn't seem to be any mechanism for following up points raised in the fire risk assessment, or any sort of mechanism for check off, to say, well, that's been dealt with, that being dealt with, that being dealt with. Issues are highlighted, but that's it. Nothing seems to happen beyond that. And again, that's a crucial thing for tenants to be involved, because we have a much better understanding of what the risks are and what points are than outside inspectors.
Yeah. So just on that first point, I need to chase that issue about the vents, and because I know that you raised it at the resident engagement session, like I said, so I need to chase why you haven't had a response on that from the fire safety team. The fire risk assessments for high-rise blocks are available on the website now for every block. Something I was going to come on to was that building control until now, building control within Bristol City Council have undertaken our fire risk assessments for us. Because of building safety legislation, their role is changing, and we've just gone out to commission an external company to undertake our fire risk assessments, and we expect that the way that risks are, that we're notified of risks that they find, will change. And I think that's a really good point. I think we need to better capture how, when and if we've addressed that risk, and make sure that's communicated back. So all I can say on that one is that the FRA is available on the website. When it's undertaken the next year, so in the 12 months time, it should pick up what works have been done and what works haven't. But it's all under review in any case, and we've got a new company starting next month, and that's something that is under the part of that review, and we'll be addressing as part of that.
If I could come back on availability on the website, the only trouble is that's a passive response. It requires people to be aware that it's available on the website and go to it. I think you need a more active one when tenants are informed that a fire risk assessment is available, and there it is if you want it, and there will be a means of follow up on the issue should you wish to take anything up. So the fire risk assessment is done, it's published, tenants are informed that it's there it is, for them to respond to it. And then a check off, a simple check off with a timescale. The issues have been dealt with. If not, why not?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And we can look at that as part of this review and the whole new approach that we're having with this new company.
So, as we've got, Philip has got his hand up, and Philip, you're also on mute, so you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, just referring back to Northfield House, we had a meeting today with Housing Repairs. And I went over to Northfield and saw a few people. And one of the complaints they're getting, which I forgot about today, and they wrote it down for me here, is that the fire doors, we've got fire marshals, 2 of them on duty all night and all day. And they're not, people are wedging open the doors, the fire doors in the corridors. And the fire marshals don't close them. And some people are quite concerned about that, because they say, well, how do we know the fire wardens are walking around, because these doors are propped open? And I went up in a lift and saw one, and it had a plastic wedge under it. I pinched it, I took it away. But somebody's wedged them open.
Okay.
So these fire marshals should, in theory, by 12 o'clock at night, make sure all the fire doors are closed. Where I live in Maudley, the doors close at 20 past 11 automatically, because they're on one of these magnet things. And at 20 past 11, you hear them slam. But, that doesn't happen in Northfield, it seems.
So there's a specific issue there about compliance that we can capture and take away, no doubt.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say fire doors should be closed at all times. They're so important for preventing the spread of fire and preventing the smoke. And our fire doors have been tested. They need to hold back the fire for at least 30 minutes. And in our tests, they perform much better than that. But like you say, only if they're closed. So, yeah, and I think there's two issues there. One, that we need to remind residents the importance of having fire doors closed. But secondly, and I need to take this away, the fire marshals that I'll be covering in a minute, that are at our blocks 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, should if they see a fire door that's open, they should be closing it. Okay. So I think yeah, and thank you for raising it.
Tom, did you? I'm conscious of time. Tom, did you want to come on that point, or should we move on with the presentation?
Just quickly come back. The fire doors to flats aren't smoke proof. There's a significant number of them have got gaps at the bottom of them because when they were fitted, there were carpets underneath them, and once the carpets are removed, they no longer become smoke proof. Okay,
so there's another issue there to add to the list of things to reflect on. Tom, quick comment on that, or should we move along?
Just very quickly, just on the fire risk assessments, we did notify via the letters that we were publishing them on the website, and to also ask the housing office. I've just checked one of the templates, but we can check whether one that was in the Gilton House letter in case that was missed, but also two, Mr. Varley, we're very happy to have a discussion on any further follow-up that you might think might be helpful for residents in your block or elsewhere.
No, it's not just my block. It should be part of the process. It should be built into the process. It shouldn't rely on somebody to pick a fuss. It should be part of the process.
It was done.
So we've got the issue, and it's not block specific. It's just if there's a process in place, did it deliver what it was supposed to? I think, and if not, why not? I guess would be one way of turning that round. But okay, I'm conscious we should let Alison proceed. We've only got to slide 1, so perhaps we should move on to slide 2.
Thank you. So last year there was a number of significant changes. There's obviously we're still learning and taking advice from the Hackett review and the Grenfell inquiry. We've got new legislation that's and regulations coming in around building safety, which is encouraging all landlords to make sure they have a new approach to fire safety. Earlier last year, the government issued guidance around undertaking new style fire safety inspections, and the guidance is called PAS 9980. And the change in this guidance is that the FRA that we were talking about, the fire risk assessment, previously didn't include an assessment of the external wall system. So that meant that balconies, windows, and crucially cladding wasn't part of the fire risk assessment. So what landlords of high-rise buildings, high-risk residential buildings now need to do is make sure that they have an FRA EW, which is a fire risk assessment external wall, which looks at the external wall system and most importantly the cladding. We had some more surveys undertaken on blocks in Barton Hill, 4 blocks in Barton Hill, which indicated there were issues with the cladding, the fire breaks within the cladding and the way that the cladding was fitted. And we actually introduced Waking Watch, which is the fire marshals that we're talking about, back in May last year, just on these 4 Barton Hill blocks. So the new FRA EWs, we completed surveys on 3 blocks around the city and got the survey results back during later part of last year, and those reports recommended interim measures. And interim measures, so it's remedial action, this is what you must do, and the suggestion was that the cladding on those blocks needed to be removed and replaced, and an interim measure is what you need to do in the meantime. And so Waking Watch is an interim measure. We also had, sadly, a fire at Twinnell House where there was a fatality, and just a matter of weeks after that, there was a fire at Eccleston House, and the fire report concluded that the EPS cladding, the certain type of cladding, contributed to the spread of the fire. So all of these factors building up together meant that we we stopped, and we knew that we needed to respond, not just in the case of Eccleston House where we had the fire report, and not just in the case of the blocks where we had the HRA suggesting remedial action. We knew that we needed to apply that learning across a whole host of other similar blocks with similar cladding.
Awesome, thank you. Alison, sorry. Nigel, did you want to come in briefly at that point?
Is this the point where we're dealing with cladding, or will it come up elsewhere? Do you want me to raise cladding issues now? Well, I will do anyway.
Yeah, fine. Yeah.
We're lucky at Gilton House in that we're getting our cladding done now because the scaffolding was up for a major refurbishment. So they're already stripping the cladding. A concern that I've had is that on one of the consultation meetings with the contractors, he said that the new cladding will only be fitted to the upper half of the block, and there'll be the brick cladding, which we already got on the bottom half. Is it the case that when you replace the cladding, you do the whole block, or are you going to leave half, do it half and half with fireproof cladding and half with the old cladding? That's the first thing. The second thing, at the repairs service user group this morning, we were told that the cladding replacement program for all the blocks that needed it was going to take 10 years. And what's sort of going to happen to the blocks that have got dodgy cladding, in those 10 years? You're going to keep the fire marshals on for 10 years?
Okay, if that's okay with you, Nigel, I'll deal with the first point, but the second point we're just going to move on to, if that's okay.
Okay.
So the type of cladding we've got concerns about, which is expanded polystyrene system, EPS, is going to be removed from everywhere it is on the block. And I mean, it's the cladding, it's the material, the insulation material, whether it's brick. It's got a brick facade put on top of that, or a render facade, is another issue. This is the cladding material that we're talking about. So all the EPS type cladding is being removed from Gilton House. What the contractor might have been referring to is the finish that goes on top of the new cladding. I mean, I can check that out with the team who are dealing with that major works, but I can assure you that all the EPS insulation material is being removed. And we're not leaving any on, and it'll be replaced with rock wool cladding, which isn't flammable. So I think what they might.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's important that's clarified to everybody as soon as possible, because there were concerns raised about that after that meeting. So as long as everybody in the block is informed that that's the situation.
Okay.
Sure. Okay.
So there's a communication point there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's whether it's a brick finish or a render finish is what goes on top of the insulation material. So that's not the concerning point.
Okay, so there's a communication there, right? Oh, it's Philip, have you got a comment on this particular
very,
point?
Very briefly, about 10 years ago, I lived in Corbett House, which has what you call EPS. About 10 years ago, a piece of rubbish killed a girl in, I think it was 26 Corbett House, poured 2 gallons of petrol over and set fire. No one knew what was happening until the window blew out, and the cladding never caught fire at all the flames were outside the building. And and if you went there now and looked up, you couldn't. The cladding went black, was never repaired, never painted, and if you went there now, you'd have a job to see where the fire was. The only difference is it's got the flat has newer windows. So to say that this EPS is unsafe, I would say is rubbish, because if 2 gallons of petrol and a burning windows, and the windows falling out because the fire was so strong, that if that doesn't set fire to cladding, nothing will. I understand about Eccleston, but Eccleston didn't have the same cladding that Corbett House and Longlands House have. And all the rest of the blocks, about 9 other blocks of flats in Barton Hill, have all been replaced with this brick face. Looks like house bricks, which they're now taking down, it seems. But EPS is not, as far as I can understand and as far as I know, is not such a dangerous thing. Because
oh, yes, it is.
Well, in Corbett House, I can only say, Nigel, in Corbett House, 2 gallons of petrol, and they know there was 2 gallons of petrol because they found the remains of the petrol cans. And
Philip, if I may, can I take that as I'll take that as a comment, I think, because I don't think that's an issue that we can adjudicate here.
No, but it is a comment. There, you know,
okay.
10 years ago, I can't remember the poor girl's name.
Yes,
but
we'll take that as a comment. Pete, did you want to make an intervention at that point?
Yeah, just as a fellow former resident of Corbett House in Barton Hill. Yes, there was a fire. Yes, the fire didn't spread. Yes, that was a horrific incident which is scarred in the memories of tenants, particularly those who lived or had family in the area at the time. However, historically, Bristol has taken an incredibly risk-averse approach. And, you know, we've been an example of how to do housing management well in terms of the decisions and the greater costs that we've incurred to protect our residents over the period of time. It is rather sad that we are seeing some of the types of cladding that we've been used to be revealed as less safe than we understood them to be when we fitted them to the retrofits of our buildings. That's not to say they are as bad as aluminium cladding, they're not. That's not to say they are as great a risk, they're not, but they do still present a risk. And I think if you reflect upon the language and the conversations that were had with Tom and the Mayor when they visited Twinell after the original fire recently, we should not underestimate the concerns that tenants living in blocks clad by these materials are expressing when they say they are scared to return to their home at night. I don't want to underestimate that point, and I don't want to underestimate the fact that we have 22-storey blocks in a city in which the Avon Fire and Rescue Service ladders only spread to the 13th storey. We have risks and we need to mitigate them.
Thanks for that, Pete. Thank you for that. Alison, should we, that's a helpful comment. Can we move on?
Thank you. So at the time in beginning of November last year, we had 38 blocks that had this type of EPS cladding on, 38 high-rise blocks, I should say. And in a very short space of time, we made the decision and introduced in a short space of time, I should say, fire marshals that we've been talking about at these 38 blocks. And with that, the policy for the residents changed. So previously, and for all other blocks, we have what's known in shorthand as a stay put policy, which means if there's a fire in your flat or you see smoke or smell smoke or see a fire, you get out. If there's a fire elsewhere in the block and it's nowhere near you, you are safer to stay put in your house until and unless the fire service tell you to get out. So that's the policy in most blocks in Bristol. But for the 38 blocks with the EPS cladding, because of concerns around the spread of fire, we introduced the Wake and Watch fire marshals, whose job it is to patrol all parts of the block 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, provide early alert in case of a fire. So they initially what they have to do if they see a fire is phone the fire service, and then they need to alert the residents of the flat and the flats next door and immediately above and below that there is a fire, and then they need to get out and to help them get out. So they initiate that simultaneous evacuation approach. The fire service will arrive very quickly. We're lucky, I think, that we're not in a remote part of the country. We've got fire engines all over Bristol. They bring around 7 fire trucks. These blocks with the EPS cladding have elevated into a different category for the fire service, and they'll bring around seven fire trucks and an awful lot of fire officers to make sure that A, they can put that fire out, but B, they can make sure that people can get out of that block and get out safely. And I should say, in particular to the comments we've just been making, this is a precaution. This is a precaution. We don't know how these blocks would perform or how the cladding would perform in the event of a fire, but we've got some information to say that the risks are higher, so this is a precaution. So as we change that policy, we let all residents know. Letters were hand delivered. We've got posters up in every block. Texts were sent to residents. And we had resident engagement events at all the blocks affected during November and December last year. So depending on how the blocks are grouped together, there was one event for a group of blocks or one event per block. So, and all residents were invited to those to come and talk to us, hear why we've changed the policy for their block, but also for them to ask us questions. And at each and every one of those events, the fire service had a presence as well, so they could give some independent fire safety advice and also talk to residents about, if there was a fire in your block, this is how we'd react and this is what we'd do and this is how we'd look to help you evacuate safely. This is costing us a lot of money, so I'll come on to that in a second. We've been liaising with Central Government Department to apply for grants and to help us pay for all of this. And we've also got some new programmes of work, so it's not just switching to Wake and Watch, got some new programmes of work to help deliver this new approach.
I've got a hand up, but I'd like you to keep going, Alison, if you don't mind. We'll take questions.
Fine.
Take questions at the end, I think.
Skipped on a little bit too much there. So new programmes of work, which I'll come into more detail on in a second, are obviously the Wake and Work which we talked about, an alarm programme, which I'll go into detail about, sprinklers and obviously EPS removal, so take that cladding off and reduce the risks. We've also, which I've touched on, got a new fire risk assessment company starting working with us next month, and with that, our approach to fire risk assessments is under review, which I mentioned earlier. And we've got plans to complete these PAS 9980 assessments for all high-rise blocks during the course of this year, which may actually come back and say, we think this block is okay, it's less risk, and in which case we'll review our precautionary approach. So I said I'd mention some of the figures. Proposal going to full council next month is for around 100 million of housing revenue account funds to be spent on fire safety programmes. Around 46 million over 10 years, which we mentioned, to replace the cladding on 38 blocks. It's been removed already on 2 blocks, and as Nigel mentioned, we're removing the cladding from Gilton House currently. 10 years is a long time, but it'll be works to replace the cladding and roofs and windows and whatever other major works need doing at the time. And if we can do it quicker, then we will. But we think 10 years is a realistic time frame for that significant amount of work. And the 46 million is just for the cladding replacement element. It's not for all the other works that we'll be doing at the time. We're proposing a sprinkler installation programme in all high-rise blocks. We've got sprinklers in flats in one block in St George, Butler House. And the proposal is that we have sprinklers in all high-rise blocks and that we install these sprinklers over a 5-year period, so starting next year. And that's all high-rise blocks, not just those with cladding. So that's all 62 high-rise blocks. Like I say, one already has sprinklers installed. 23-24, the Wake and Watch service is estimated to cost around 8 million, and they're the fire marshals that we've been talking about. And over the course of next year, so a 1-year programme, we'll be looking to put simultaneous evacuation alarms in those blocks where the EPS isn't going to be able to be removed within that year, and it will replace the Wake and Watch. So those alarms are alarms in each and every flat, and they are triggered by a fire somewhere in the building. So this will be the means with which we are able to tell all residents in the block, there's a fire somewhere in your block, you need to get out. So we're looking to stand down the waking watch and put in the alarms. Sorry, did someone say something?
No, I think somebody breathed. You're all right.
Oh, okay.
So I side, that's a recipe for disaster.
So hold that comment for a moment. Carry on, Alison, and we'll take comments at the end.
So there's our programmes and new proposals. And just one final quick thing to say is that fire safety regs changed in this month, in fact, in 2023. And there's a whole raft of expectations for landlords like us of high risk, high rise residential buildings. So a new inspection programme for fire doors to make sure that they are safe and they're not damaged. Sharing building plans with Avon Fire and Rescue, which we do already. The PAS 9980 inspection programme underway. Making sure that the information boxes that are in each and every high-rise block are up to date and are lockable. So this is information for the fire service when they get to the block. It's the information that they need around floor plans and where the laundry is, and is there a gas shut-off point and all the rest of it. Fire safety equipment. So this is lifts and ventilation systems, etc. We need to make sure that the certification is accessible to all, so we can demonstrate to residents and any other stakeholders that it has been serviced, it has been checked, and this is the information to prove it. And finally, we need to make sure that we develop an annual communication plan with residents. So just building on the resident engagement events that we held before Christmas, new notice boards, and make sure that we improve, or we and all the other landlords improve our communication methods with the residents, and that we develop an annual plan and make sure that we deliver to that plan. So that's the end.
Okay,
any
thank you.
Questions?
Thank you, Alison. So I've got 3 hands up. I've got an eye on the time. I'd like to draw us to a close by the hour if I can. So I've got Nigel, Carla, and Sibasiso. So in that order, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm sorry about keep going on, but there are concerns. The first thing is the interim measures for those over the 10-year period. The only one you've mentioned is this simultaneous evacuation. And I think that's incredibly dangerous. If the alarm goes off all over the block and the policy is to get out, you're going to get a rush for the stairs. And I don't know how many blocks, I would imagine in quite a few blocks, there's only one staircase. And you only need somebody to trip over or cause an obstruction. And you've got a very serious situation. So this simultaneous evacuation policy needs careful thought. I mean, the dangers of it was why you had a stay-put policy in the first place. But I really do think, you know, that could cause a disaster should it ever be needed. The second thing is the question of sprinklers. There'll be opposition to sprinklers from a lot of tenants because of the danger of setting them off accidentally, especially in kitchens. I mean, there's quite a few of us have sent smoke alarms off accidentally by burning the toast. But if you end up with a soak-through flat, that could be an issue. So if we're going to install sprinklers, then there's got to be an engagement with tenants about, you know, because there will be resistance to it. The final point I want to make is a question of personal evacuation plans for people with restricted mobility. This is something, again, that we talked about this morning. We're being on and on and on. A tenant has to know that they're entitled to a personal evacuation plan. They may move into a block of flats perfectly mobile, but given the nature of it, you could become immobile during a long period of tenancy. And most people don't know that they're entitled to a PEP and a priority evacuation. It'd be interesting to know whether the fire marshals know who's got a PEP, because there's a problem with communication. The wardens often know who should need a PEP, but I think it's been said at a meeting, there was no mechanism of communication between the wardens and the housing department or whoever issues the PEP. So that's something that's got to be very carefully looked at, how you evacuate people with mobility problems without blocking the staircases and blocking the exits of other people. because at the moment the situation isn't satisfactory at all, and people in our block with restricted mobility are worried.
So,
I am.
thank you.
So it would take me ages to get down the stairs, and I'd probably obstruct everybody else above me, and still a good chance of falling down them.
Thank you, Nigel. Can I hold those in terms of response? Carla, would you like to come in with your point at this point, and then Sibyl Cisse, and I got Philip, and then we'll draw to a close, I think.
Thank you. My question is about the EPS cladding removal, and it's a two-parter. Is replacement cladding going to be installed directly after the EPS is removed, or is there going to be a gap? I ask this because I've heard news recently about high-rise blocks in other areas where they've been left without cladding, which obviously in winter in a cost of living crisis is not good. And second, has the answer to this question I've just asked been communicated to tenants so that they are reassured that they are hopefully not going to be left uninsulated?
Okay, so we'll hold on to. So I'll take all the comments at the moment, and then we'll come back in a group if you don't mind. Sibyl Cisse, would you want to come in at that point, and then I've got Philip, and then I'll ask you to respond, and maybe Tom also to respond.
Sure. I think it'd be good to understand if the firework is going to work simultaneously with the renovation program. For example, the fire that took place in Easton, the communal rooms, people had no access to, and most of the communal rooms need planning and support from the council in order for them to be upgraded in a more modern fitting. So if these programs worked together, we could see communal spaces being fit for purpose and modernized at the same time if these developers, or if the coordination has taken place simultaneously. Is that the intention?
Thank you for that and for the ongoing commentary. I can see people nodding in response to that. Philip.
Yeah, I just want quickly these secure information boxes that the fire brigade have access to. Could they, partly onto Nigel's point really, the people who have personal evacuation plans or mobility issues, could their addresses be put in that box so that it's secure, but the fire brigade know which people need evacuating or will have problems evacuating and may be unable to walk due to strokes, whatever, age, whatever.
Okay, thank you for that contribution. So Alison, and if you'd like to respond, I mean, there's some there to take away, I think, and maybe some you want to respond to at this point in time.
Yeah, I think first of all, about vulnerable residents. We do have information about who's vulnerable and who would have difficulties self-evacuating, and I think where we've got a high-rise block that's got this cladding with a warden, we've got excellent information because our wardens know our residents really well, and it kind of answers two questions there. What we're doing is sharing that information with the fire service. We don't want to share it with the fire marshals. This is really sensitive information. We share it with the fire service, and we also share it with our emergency centre in Bristol City Council, who are alerted directly by the fire service or by the fire marshal that there's a fire in the block. They hold that information about vulnerable residents and who need some support. And I think what's been really reassuring in having the fire service with us at the events is the number of fire officers that they have on these 7 fire trucks that they will bring. And while the lifts are out of action for residents, they can override, they can use the lifts, and the number of fire officers, some of them are there to tackle the fire, but some of them are there to make sure that people get out safely. So we do have that really good information, Nigel, and we are sharing it. I mean, I know that there's a suggestion, I know some landlords share the addresses of residents who need support in boxes on site. Personally, I don't think that having a piece of paper that, you know, whilst it's got a lock on it, it might not be that secure. I think it's better to have that information, make sure it's up to date, and make sure if in the event of a fire, we share it directly with Avon Fire and Rescue. And we are, Nigel, just going back to your point, we are dealing with the wardens and we are making sure that we're up to date with the vulnerable residents information. It's a really good point about, Carla, the cladding removal. It will be part and parcel of the same contract. So we're not looking to take the cladding off and then phew, that's the risk gone. We'll come back in a few years' time to put new stuff back on. However, then there may be a gap in that contract of work, and I think there's the pressure to get the risky cladding off, but actually we know that what that does is leave that property uninsulated, colder homes, more damp and mould, and it's not great for our tenants. So we need to really manage that whole programme so that we you know, where we're doing the windows and the roof and some internal works and all the rest of it, that we make sure that there's a shortest gap as possible between taking the old stuff on and the new stuff on, then put the new stuff back on. It hasn't been communicated with residents in that way, but we have said we're not removing the cladding, we are replacing the cladding. That's the message that we've given out to people. And in answer to the other question about the renovation programme, where other works are necessary, absolutely we'll be doing those at the same time. So in some cases the cladding is quite new. Just thinking, there's a couple of blocks in Redcliffe, Yeamans and Broughton where the major refurb work was completed, I think around 2019, 2020. It's got EPS cladding on the bottom two ground and first floor. All the other works are done. So all we need to do in that case is go replace the cladding in those two floors, and that's done. So we won't be doing other works. But in other blocks that were due for a major refurb anyway, including upgrade to the communal areas, that will all be done at the same time, which is why I was referring to the 46 million. And that's just the replacement cladding costs. It's not, you know, the whole bill over 10 years to do all the works required to all those blocks will be much, much higher, but that's kind of accounted for separately.
Okay.
Have I answered the questions there?
What about substantive evacuation?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Nigel. Sprinklers, it's a really, really good point. And I think we need to do a lot of communication with residents with some really good information about sprinklers, how they're set off, how hot, the heat levels that sets off sprinklers. It's very, very different to a smoke alarm. And I think we've been through this. We've been through this at Butler House with residents. We've learned a lot of lessons, and I think we really need to reassure residents on how effective sprinklers are in putting out fires. So I mean that's essentially what we want to do, isn't it? If there is a fire, we need to put it out and not have to worry about it spreading or not. But also the circumstances which trigger them and which don't. And people talk about steam or burning toast, and they don't trigger sprinklers. But I think it is going to be part of the programme is that communication piece with the residents in each and every block. Simultaneous evacuation, I mean, we are following national guidance on this, and like I say, there are issues with blocks with single staircases. All blocks are different, but the fire service can override the lifts, like I say, and we are following National Fire Chief guidance on this. Right. So it isn't something that we've come up with in Bristol. This is the recommended approach.
Okay, so thank you for that. So I'm very conscious we've got two more items that we need to get through, and we've got an hour. I've got Christine waiting. Christine, have you got a question? If so, can we take it offline? Raise your question and we'll take it offline if it needs answering by our colleagues.
Yeah, I've got a mains connected fire alarm system because it's sheltered housing. It hasn't been checked since pre-pandemic. And are you going to pay attention to that for all tenants?
Can I invite Sarah and Alison perhaps to respond directly to you offline, because I'm conscious we need to. Fine, yeah. Thank you. That's great. So we'll just clarify what's happening in those not the high-rise stock, but elsewhere in terms of alarms. If that's okay with everybody, I'd like us to move on to item 4, which is the budget update for 23-24. Thank you for your contributions to that fire safety discussion. Sarah, are you leading on HRA?
Yes, I will be. So
Alison, could you stop sharing your screen? I think you're still.
Yeah, sorry,
Thank you.
I
Fantastic.
didn't realise I still was.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me share my screen one moment.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, apparently so. Let me try that again.
There you go. That's it.
There you go. And I will. Okay, I hope that's large enough and everyone can see the presentation. I will ask if we could save questions to the end, because it may well be there will be an answer to your question in the presentation, and it will allow us to get to the end and then ask any questions. So the reason I'm bringing an item today regarding the budget is for three main reasons. One is it's something that we thought would be of strategic interest to the board. Secondly, we are looking for some feedback regarding planned investments in blocks and communal areas. And thirdly, it may well be that there's something of interest within this presentation that the board would like to receive future updates or have future agenda items to discuss. So I appreciate that for many people on this call, you will be aware of some of these facts, but every year we set the housing revenue account budget, and it's a ring-fenced account. So the money can only be used to manage our council housing and our estates, and it's primarily made up of income from tenants and leaseholders, rents and service charges. And the main purpose is that we use that to repair and invest in our assets, so our homes and our communal areas and our estates, and that we provide our housing related services, so our tenancy and estate management. And we maintain a 30-year plan. So if you think about the complexities of something like all of the different programs that we have to invest in homes and the different years in which things need to be replaced and improved, this allows us to keep track of our projected income and expenditure, and we've got a responsibility to make sure that that plan wouldn't go into deficit over that 30-year period. It covers all of the homes that are rented or that we manage for leaseholders, which is about 28,500 homes. And like many social landlords, where there are challenges for managing the HRA. So the rents are low in comparison to private rented sector or even to private registered providers or housing associations. Much of the stock we have is expensive to maintain. So just the reflection on the conversations we've just been having about high-rise homes and fire safety measures. There's often high levels of support needs for our residents. The demand for social housing remains incredibly high. And finally, we've got new regulatory requirements coming along with changing regulation, the social housing white paper that we need to make sure we're able to respond to. Now, in particular pressures for 2023, so our new financial year, are that this year we will increase rents. There's a recommendation to increase rents in line with the government rent cap. So previously we had set within the business plan an expectation that rents would increase above the rate of inflation in order to fund additional investment that was put into the plan last year. However, there's a national rent cap that we need to adhere to for this year. However, there are above inflationary uplifts in many of the costs associated with managing and maintaining our homes. So that includes utilities and materials. And also we're seeing quite a steep increase in the cost of building new homes. And then finally, the other pressure for this year are the new commitments in the programmes of work for fire safety, which Alison has just shared with us. A few other challenges, I won't go through all of these, but there's some uncertainty around the future for rent setting. So beyond 2025, there's no government policy in place at the moment. We have another pressure caused by fire safety is that for our insurance, we have a £5 million excess on properties with EPS cladding, which means we've had to make sure that we have sufficient reserves should we ever require that to cover any costs. And at the bottom up, we've just mentioned the energy bill relief scheme. So whereas domestic homes are covered and have caps on costs, there isn't any such thing for public sector organisations and the utility costs that we have to pay. So to address those issues and make sure that we have a balanced plan moving forward, we've had to building some future assumptions. So one of those is about efficiency savings. So basically making a commitment to look at ways that we can save money. And we've got different targets, some relating to from 2024 and some from 2025. So we have to explore what those will look like and look through options to make future savings. We've committed to reviewing the service charges that we so those are charges that leaseholders and tenants pay for services that are associated to their homes, and we have a responsibility to make sure that the charges raised cover the cost of providing that service, and it's been some time since we reviewed those to make sure that that was the case. There are some programmes of work that we've either slowed or stopped or slipped. So, for example, some of the work that is stopped is our less priority work, such as garage repairs, and some of the work that is slowed. And I will come back to you with an example because I've forgotten which programme that was. But in order to try and make sure that we're in a position where we can we have a manageable budget for the year, we've had to make some changes to our programmes of work. And finally, we've applied what's called an optimism bias against the capital programme. So that just means that on most years, we underspend against our forecasts for capital programmes because they're normally large, complex programmes of work, and there may be delays or reasons why things aren't delivered on time. So there's something built in that says we have a budget provision, but we expect that there will be some money that slips into subsequent years. So that's written into the budget to try and make sure that our budget's balanced. What we have done is we've protected funding for really significant areas of spend. So that includes our new build within the housing revenue account, and in particular the projects that contribute to Project 1000, which is the Mayor's target to build 1,000 new homes by 2024, new affordable homes in the city. We've also protected our commitment to provide £80 million for energy efficiency measures that will help us to ensure that all of our homes have reached a minimum EPC. So that's to do with the energy efficiency rating of the home of C by 2030. We've retained the investment to launch our new bathroom replacement programme this year, and 8.7 million over the next 5 years, specifically to improve standards in communal areas, blocks and estates. So that's above the previous commitments that we had, and 1 million for refurbishing parks, which are HRA park or play areas, which are linked to some of our multi-storey flats. And then in addition, we've got all of the new provision for Waking Watch, fire alarms, and the EPS removal that Alison talked to us about earlier. I mentioned in the last slide that there's almost 9 million committed to investing in our blocks and our communal areas. And so far we have committed money for next year to continue the provision of our rapid response team. So that's a team of operatives who will go to different blocks and just work on making any improvements to communal areas that will make a difference for residents. We have an assisted gardening programme. So this is money to help us reach out to residents who are struggling to maintain their gardens, usually because of age or disability, to offer help to bring gardens back up into a good standard. We have 190k specifically to increase the provision of our environmental improvement and neighbourhood improvement bids. So this is money that resident groups can bid for to make either environmental or general neighbourhood improvements in their area. So we're increasing that provision for next year. And money to improve communal waste and recycling facilities. So there's almost just over £1 million, which is uncommitted. And what would be good in a moment, when I stop screen sharing, we can get your views on the 2 areas that we've already got up for consideration, which are about looking at our CCTV infrastructure. We know that we have issues with cameras that aren't working, or cables or fibres that need to be upgraded to improve the CCTV provision. So that was one area that we thought, one priority area that money could help us focus on. And the second was damp and mould, and having some contingency funding for looking at damp and mould issues across our stock. So, and obviously we would welcome any other ideas that the board have regarding that. And finally, just to say that the next step is this report goes to full council for a decision on the 21st of February. And I'm sure many of you will know this, but as part of that process, members of the public can submit either statements or questions to the board up to 3 working days in advance. And so just to flag to the board that is an opportunity. If you did have any questions or comments that you wanted the full council to consider, it's an opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Sarah. So there's an invitation there for comment on the specific question of how to use that as yet unallocated resource. And I've got Philip first and then Nigel, I think. Philip? You're muted at the minute, I think, Philip.
Yeah. Hello. Just regarding the 1.3 million on the rear.
Yes.
In as you know, I lived in Barton Hill. CCTV was wonderful when it was operating. In Bedminster, Northfield House in particular, where there are lots of problems, there are door cameras, as there is in Birchall House and Maudley House. But there's no recording facility. Surely it would be easy to put that, because Corbett, Northfield House, Maudley House, and the other one I can't remember, Birchall House, all have wardens' offices. So it wouldn't take a lot of money to put a recording facility in a secure area. Whereas when anything happens, the tenants can report to the council something's happened and they can go back and look. We're not talking about having operators there 24 hours a day. We're just talking about a recording facility that the infrastructure's already there. All you need is a computer hard drive to record it for 30 days, and then it could wipe and start again. Surely that's not beyond the realms of
okay. So there we've got one suggestion to add to the list for the expenditure.
Yeah, suggestion noted. Thank you, Philip.
You're welcome.
Nigel.
Yeah, I think recently there's been a problem with wardens in terms of industrial action against overwork and underpay. I just wonder whether that's been resolved or whether any money can be set aside to address the needs of the warden service, because it's absolutely crucial to preserve the quality of council housing. You're probably going to say that they're paid according to national rates, but it's always possible to boost the pay through restructuring. I think that's an urgent issue, that something is done about the warden service, whose morale and numbers seem to be declining quite rapidly. On another point, I'm grateful that the estate improvement budget's being preserved, and ask that this full tenant engagement on how that is put into operation. We don't just end up with a few trees and flowers, that somebody comes and asks us what we want.
Thank you. So I was going to say my switchboard is veritably lit up. Donald and Tom, did you want to come back on those points before we move on?
Excuse me. Yeah, there was no industrial action with the wardens. There was industrial action with housing officers.
Sorry.
That was an ongoing dispute, of which there have been several meetings between management and trade unions, and an external report has been commissioned, which is due to report very, very soon, and the recommendations will be shared with the unions. There were 2 short-term strikes, and everyone's waiting to see what the outcome of this report is, but it was not wardens who were striking.
Yeah, sorry about that. I should have said housing officers. Yeah.
Okay, Tom, did you want to come on out, or should we take a couple more comments from
Donald has said what I
has
was going
dealt
to
it,
say.
right? Okay,
There's
so
a strategic review underway, but I think Nigel will take that on board as part of the reviewing the report.
So then I've got Sibasiso and then Tony.
Yes, hi, thanks. Yeah, great to see all that the council is making to make accessible use of council estate. Just wanted to check, when you say the 1 million for parks, is that the 1 million that was going to be kicked off, or is this a specific one for council estate parks? Second part is, yes, definitely. I think the housing strikes and everything else has got a knock-on impact in terms of how local residents would like to access the funds that you say are available. Because A, most people don't know about them. B, when you try and access them, it would almost take you about 2 years before you even get a go-ahead. And then by the time you get a go-ahead, the housing officer you're working with is now moved somewhere else. So you got to start again. So most of the time, correct me if I'm wrong, and as you've got access to the budget, most of the time that budget is never really utilized. And therefore we keep seeing spaces not really looking friendly and inviting and welcoming within council estates. But if this budget was utilized properly, through planning, through design, and we could access it, it could make a world of a difference. I remember when I moved into this estate, it was during lockdown, and all the residents were all outside doing gardening, and there was no sign that there's these things going on, and we continue to do so without any of the budgets from the council. So, and now the last year, no one did anything, right? So community action is there, but without these resources, it's not mobilized, and therefore things don't continue. And when we try and access it, it just takes so long, as if, one could apply for a grant from Content much quicker than getting in touch with the council for the things that you say you want us to use, and you want us to mobilize as a block, you want us to mobilize, come to you, we do that, and then it just falls on deaf ears. So great initiatives, but I think your internal capacity to respond to the demands of your residents trying to do things then is what's really been questioned. Yeah, sounds good, but the capacity to access it is really far and in between.
Thank you. So Tom, I'll take Tony's comment and question and ask for a response to that one, if you don't mind. Tony, go for it.
Yeah, actually, I think it might be easier if Tom responded first, because mine is, well, actually, no, I won't usurp you as chair, Alex. So my comment was really just going back to what Philip was saying about CCTV. just so that we're aware, is for that part of our ward, we got some funding from Safer Streets from the Home Office, and some of that money is being used to look at CCTV being installed. So it might be worth just making sure we link up with Eddie King's team to make sure that we're not duplicating effort, if that makes sense. And then the other thing I was also just going to quickly say is, you say about the two options for further investment. Obviously, I was at the meeting earlier on when we looked at the damp and mould, and given how much that's having an impact and how much that's costing a year to treat, I would heartily recommend that we do some considerable investment into that area, because I think at the moment, if I remember what Laura was telling us earlier on, it's about 95% of open disrepair cases have some sort of damp and mould impact, and then 80% of the 400 incidents that we've been reported also have some sort of damp and mould. So it's clearly a very serious problem.
Okay, so we got the comment there on making a connection around the cameras, and we've got the issue of damp and mould getting an endorsement as being up there as one of the key priorities. Tom, did you want to come back on those couple, and then I've got Pete all coming in after that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just on the CCTV, it's a really important point. Housing are linked in very closely with the Safe Streets work that's happening, and the other thing that we've done is set up an internal project board within Housing and Landlord Services to sort of take that CCTV project forward. So it's a major project, as you know. There's vast parts of our CCTV that is in dire need of an upgrade. In terms of the 1 million ring fence for improvements to parks and playgrounds, yes, that is for those play parks that are sat on HRA land. We're currently working through where that investment will be allocated, and obviously looking also a range of things around kind of the current condition of the parks. Also looking at, is there investment also being made in that area through other routes, just making sure that we make sure that investment spreads as far as possible to benefit as many tenants as possible. And then on the damp and mould elements specifically, it's a really serious matter, and it's something that both myself and Councillor Lady Kling have had a joint cabinet briefing on this morning. And there's a number of things arising out of that, and I think what perhaps may be very beneficial, if I may suggest, Chair, is that if board members are keen, that we bring that to the next meeting of the Housing Management Board, is that we have damp and mould as a topic around the current state of play and what we have been doing and what we are proposing to do.
Thank you for that. Yes, I mean, colleagues, I see some nods on that as bringing damp and mould as a particular item. Donald or Tom, did you want to pick up on Ciso's comment about capacity or facilitating community action and making sure this, where the will is there, the sort of support is also available?
I'll address that. Excuse me. Liz Cheatham's on the call, but I'm not asking her to make any contribution because I'll make the statement. There are two strands happening as we speak. Liz and her colleagues are reviewing how the tenant participation service works. Our recruitment programme to fill, I think it's 3 vacancies. Plus, I'm having formal discussions with Penny German from Community Development. And the thinking at the moment, which isn't finalised between myself and Community Development, is how can we bring both sets of resources together in a targeted fashion on estates that need it most. There's no preconditions, no decisions have been made. We just need to have that joint discussion so we have expand our capacity for community engagement, which is led by a set of priorities in those estates that need it most. In terms of housing officer capacity, which was referred to earlier on in terms of industrial action, the average caseload per officer is 500 units. The demand of those 500 units will vary, of course, according to the type of unit where they're located, and that is being picked up in the review that Councillor Reinhardt referred to earlier on, and which we'll be dealing with over the next 4 weeks. In general terms, the broader question is there capacity within housing. There is capacity within housing. What we're, apart from those 2 reviews which need to be completed, there is the issue of recruitment. where we have a whole wide range of skills where it's extraordinarily difficult to recruit to, and we're going out once, twice, 3 times. The council considers itself that considers it as a good employer, and we can offer long-term career opportunities. But the fact of the matter is, we have recruitment issues in key areas, which we just have to keep plugging away on.
Thanks, Donald. So I'm going to, so just in terms of process, I'm going to take Pete's comment or question at this point, but then I think we need to allow enough time to move on to talk about home choice. So we've got a half an hour of our scheduled time after that. So Pete, would you like to make your intervention at this point?
Yes, thank you, Alex. I mean, interesting to hear Donald talking about recruitment there. Obviously, yourself as someone who writes about housing, myself as someone who researches about housing, I am sure that we are both acutely aware that no longer within the Government Office Southwest region, the largest all 9 Government Office regions, is there anywhere that teaches housing. It is quite simply a deficit in the higher education syllabus. So obviously there are going to be fewer people coming in as a graduate entry to the profession, because in the words of David Cameron, the Prime Minister announced the death of social housing. So why would anyone take on the £140,000 of debt of an undergrad degree like my own in housing policy and management? Obviously there are problems with that. I get those problems, but I do think more can be done in terms of making a pathway of career progression using the courses that do exist within the Chartered Institute of Housing's online syllabus to create opportunities for career progression that aren't currently being taken. That's my first point. Secondly, in terms of damp versus CCTV, yes, Home Office research study number 78 points out improving the street lighting will get you a better result than improving the CCTV. So I err on the side of not CCTV improvement, but damp and mold improvement. These are things that literally kill tenants. And I'm sorry, we've not been good at actually matching the demands of the tenant community during the cost of living crisis. So I echo the sentiment to focus on damp and mold treatment. Finally, I want to give an example of a local community action to demonstrate the tension and the deficit. The Eastfield Park, which sits between the Home Ground, Clover Ground and Combe Paddock streets, all of which are social housing, but fall until recently within Westbury-on-Trim and Henleys Ward, now within Southmead Ward. When they were in Westbury, they were told, well, you're too affluent to get any funding, so we're just going to ignore you. Now they're in Southmead and Southmead Ward F, in one of the 88 most deprived IMD wards in the country. They're just overlooked. So we have quite possibly the only park in Southwest England which has no bins, no benches. And when people complained about the skateboarding park and the walls of death, along came some JCBs and literally just buried them into the ground. So we can't play football, we can't play any ball games because the park is uneven. We desperately need some of that 1 million money that's been announced, because even where we get the money and we bid for things like trees to be planted, literally the day before the work was to be done, the council refused the permission, having for 18 months been consulted. So there is a genuine communication disconnect, there is a funding deficit, and there is a sense of being unloved that has seen the ward participation in the electoral process drop from 94% electoral turnout, a record of any polling place anywhere in England, to about 48% at the last election. Please focus some attention on the Eastfield Park. The residents need the love.
I think that message is very clear and a point well made there. Before we move on, Tom, did you want to say something very briefly? Because I'll invite Liz Dewing to make a presentation.
On that park, I've literally earlier today sent an inquiry to try and find out whether that park is HRA land or whether it sits within the general fund. So we'll find out whether that could be considered in the round of the money that's been allocated for HRA parks, and I'll come back to you directly as well, Pete, once I get an answer to share what that answer is.
Thanks, Tom. Just to demonstrate the absurdity slightly further, the Avon County Council footpath 123 that comes from the village of Westbury-on-Trim to the park, literally nobody knows the ownership of it. there is a gap between the village and the estate of about 120-foot height difference, where nobody even knows the ownership of the path, of how to get to the estate. There is no street lighting. It is just neglected, and the trees are now twice the height of the houses because for 70 years nobody has tended the ground. Some investigation is welcome. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Liz Dewing, could you should we move on at that point to the next item?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm going
So
to
this
keep
is
my camera off because I have had my screen drop a few times.
okay. So this is the HomeChoice Allocations review. What's the current
Correct.
state of play? Over to you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to put the presentation up. And again, I'm going to lose everybody when I do that. So please let me know where there are questions. Is that showing in presentation view yet?
Oh, not presentation view yet. No.
And let me just pop it in presentation view. Right.
That's it.
So we came to the board in October 21 when the review was restarted. We came back again in May 22 when we were busy putting proposals together to go out to consultation. This is now the feedback of the results of consultation and an overview, a succinct overview of the recommendations that are going to be taken forward around changes to the housing allocation policy. So public consultation was originally going to be a shorter period, but because it ended up starting in holidays, it ran for a full 12 weeks from July to October. And we're going to go through a brief summary of the response. 77.6% of the responses were from people on the housing register. There were 1,653 in total. Things that are going to affect our ability to actually make the changes. There is a big technology program rolling out new technology for the housing services. And that means that making changes to our current systems is both not viable and not practical. Too costly, too short a lifespan, too difficult to do when there's a massive change happening just down the road. So some of these changes are only going to be able to be made when the new technology becomes available. And there are some changes that are going to be made that are more urgent, but they will require interim workarounds and manual efforts. So those are things that may inhibit how quickly some of these things are able to happen. And obviously, we've got this big focus on addressing the high volumes and costs associated with temporary accommodation, and that will naturally direct where some of these, where the priority of some of these changes is. And provided the legal review is in support, the key changes are going to be proposed. Consultation overview, there were 21 questions, so it was a much longer consultation than is normal. We got the 1,653 completed responses over 12 weeks. Practically everybody made use of the free text response at the end. We got a broad support for most of the things that were proposed. So 66.6% approval for moving to managed choice, where we make up to 50% of allocations by means of direct offer. So people can still bid. People will start off bidding. They will be bidding even when we are investigating direct offers, but we have the ability to intervene to try and make some of those placements happen faster. There was a degree of ambivalence about the proposal to place restrictions on band 4, very even spread across people being neutral, people being for, and people being against that. There was support for extending downsizing assistance and a 64% approval for increasing the priority of under-occupiers, 67% in support of wider use of local lettings policies, 63% in favour of increasing the priority and provision for people exiting social care, and 51% in favour of increasing priority of care leavers. There was support for placing all homeless cases in a single band. Currently, they're spread between two bands, band 2 for main duty, band 3 for relief and prevention. And there was also support for introducing a new deal for the homeless at home. So people who might otherwise feel that their only way to access the register is to actually become actively homeless, and we're trying to steer away from that. There was strong support for changes to the rules regarding effective date, and there was not a lot of support for changing the current income threshold, savings threshold, or debt thresholds. As I said, more than half the respondents used that free text section at the end. That is an absolute nightmare to analyse at the end of the day, because people can write whatever they like, irrespective of whether a question was asked about it before or not, or whether it's related. We did analyse all of that data, and the main themes that emerged were perceptions that the current scheme is unfair or not working, or there are issues with the length of time taken to be made an offer. There are desire for changes to the current application process, and things like more access, more information, and a quicker and easier system. A request for more hands-on support and more feedback to applicants. There were some concerns around overcrowding and bedroom need rules, and more priority to be given to various categories. Some of those things, in the way they were framed, gave us the idea that some of it is just about understanding, not necessarily about contestation. And there were obviously things that were raised in that section that are technically out of scope for the housing review. They're things that we will feed on, obviously, into the areas that they relate to, but they were not specifically within our ambit to tackle. So the need to build more social housing, both small and large properties, the need to do more to tackle issues in social housing, antisocial behaviour, fraud, non-occupation, subletting, and so on. And then a lot of commentary around the state of the private rented sector and the fact that that is so unaffordable and presents challenges. So most of that text input reiterated what we already understood from the substantial amount of research that we had already done, with all the focus groups and the journey mapping and the research papers and so on. Does anybody want to query anything to do with the consultation feedback? Or can I go straight on to where we're going, having analysed and discussed and reviewed that?
I think we're good to move on, Liz.
Great. Okay. So starting changes, the things that are going to be implemented as soon as we can is the move to managed choice, in which we make up to 50% of allocations by means of direct offer, and the move of care leavers, increasing their priority to band 1, and improving the access to general needs housing for people exiting supported care. Obviously, people exiting adult supported care free up spaces for those who are in higher need, and similarly with young people exiting externally supported accommodation, that frees up spaces for people coming into the pipeline at the other end. Other changes that are going to be introduced over the course of the next year or so before the new technology arrives. Certain additional under-occupiers are to be prioritised to band 1. So we're not making that increase of under-occupancy a universal thing. We're looking at it being focused specifically on categories of property that are most useful to help move people on faster. So houses, all level access flats and maisonettes, 3-bed plus properties, and so on. And that will be made explicit. All categories of homeless to be prioritised to band 2, largely to encourage those threatened with homelessness to approach the council earlier, so that we can put more into stay in place or stay put endeavours through the homelessness prevention team, and reduce the risk of homelessness through earlier intervention. We're introducing a new deal for the homeless at home, which places those faced with eviction from the family home where they don't have rights on an equal footing with people in main homelessness, and incentivising them to stay put, provided it is safe to do so. We don't want people staying put if that's not a safe thing to do, but we don't want people feeling they have to become homeless in order to be taken seriously, when actually it may be uncomfortable, but they could continue safely to be where they are. Other changes. Composite need. We already give a 6-month back date within a band when people have 2 or more of the qualifying composite needs. We are increasing the backdating to 12 months for those who have 3 or more qualifying needs in future. That change won't be a retrospective change. It'll be applied from a point in time, because to try and review the 19,000 plus on the register and make that change would be an impossible task. But obviously, as people's changes of circumstances come through, that would be affected. And then extending the use of local lettings policies. We already have one in in development in Knoll. There is a list that was provided in the consultation of other areas where they have in principle been agreed that they will be brought forward, and over and above that list we would be open to discussion with community organisations and members and resident representations around other areas having local lettings policies. There are some things we cannot do until the new technology becomes available, simply because either the functionality doesn't exist in our existing technology, or because it's not possible to make an interim or manual workaround to effect the changes that are needed at the scale that they're needed. So, for instance, we will be looking at a revised approach to savings and income thresholds, which makes greater provision for household circumstance. So we recognise, for instance, that an earned income threshold of 40,000 as it is at the moment for a single individual, for instance, is a substantially different proposition from the same income for a household of 4. So we're looking at accommodating a slightly more nuanced approach to that when we are able to do that with the technology. We will not be changing the current debt threshold. We do, in the interim, we intend targeting people who are in band 4 with additional information to better manage their expectations. At the moment, more than half the people on the housing register are in band 4. And they have a less than 1% chance of ever being housed. And the people who do get housed out of band 4 typically are those who could apply for age-restricted or sheltered, supported housing for older people. So we're looking at really in the interim, before we've got the tech, trying to really manage those expectations by providing them with additional information and signposting. But as and when the technology is available, we would like to restrict bidding for band 4, so that those people can bid on age-restricted or supported housing for older people, and targeted properties, so adverts that are specifically open to people from band 4. And then to provide them with a lot of ideally automated signposting and information to help them take greater agency over finding alternative solutions, rather than just sitting in limbo with a sense of false expectation. The application form is a major bugbear, but improving the application form and the process around that to make it simpler, easier, more logical, to give people to manage their expectations right up front. Those changes will be made as and when we have new technology, and we'd be looking at the introduction of more automated functionality. So annual renewals, which should be taking place at the moment, but we haven't got the capacity to run them without extensive manpower, as well as introducing, in support of direct offers, auto matching and auto bidding. And there are other changes we're looking at which are not specifically policy related. So a pilot to test the value of different approaches to incentivizing downsizing, to try and access more of those in-demand properties, and to encourage people who are under-occupying to particularly consider moving into new build properties. That's helped by the increased priority of under-occupiers, and it's helped by the extension of local lettings policies. And then we're looking at a lot of process changes, so enhancements to communication, to information and guidance, and to the provision of information and data insight. All of those things with a view to better managing people's expectations and increasing their individual agency through the process of seeking housing. There are other peripheral considerations, improvements that are being made. So the priority move on scheme, which is the prioritisation of clients in homelessness supported housing, so people for whom private rented is not a solution, cannot be a solution because of their circumstances. There have been updates made to that scheme, and there is a review of the mutual exchange process going on to make sure that where possible that can be used for people to self-serve and avoid the necessity of coming onto the housing register if they can effectively solve their problem by other means. There are a couple of things we haven't mentioned on here. There is a major initiative also going on to do what we call housekeeping. So obviously the ability to really perform allocations effectively relies on the data in the register being accurate, up to date, and as complete as possible. So there's a housekeeping exercise that will be focusing on band 1 and band 2 new applications, and then band 1 and band 2 tenant applications, and then going through the remainder to look at where there are invalid cases that we could either update or remove. The partnership agreement between ourselves and our housing partners is in the process of review at the moment. bringing it up to speed in terms of just legalities and regulatory requirements, but also to review some of the principles around having a similar operating ethos so that the experience for applicants is more consistent and more predictable. And then we've also, in this process, we're doing a general rewrite of the policy to improve the ease of reading and understanding, to use simpler plain English, to increase the glossary and extend the explanations of terms that are used and definitions that are referred to, and to try and make the whole process of engaging with HomeChoice an easier and a more satisfactory one for service users. And that is my story.
Thank you, Liz. I've got a couple of hands up already. We've only got about 5 minutes for comments and
I'm
questions.
going to take the presentation down.
If you could, that would be great.
Okay, if I can.
So, Sibasiso, you're first, and then Philip, and then Christine.
Yes, it's brilliant to hear about the updates to HomeChoice. Just wanted to check in terms of the void between someone moving into a property and the property being, made fit for purpose. The time scale and the actual cost of that exercise. Do you have a rough idea? And does that impact on allocations, or does that impact on housing?
I don't have an idea myself. I'm afraid technically that is out of our scope. That sits within estates, but I'm sure Tom might want to comment, or Donald may want to comment on that.
So let's hold that one for a moment. So Tom's got his hand up. So Philip and Christine, if you could make your comments or brief questions. You're on to mute, Philip. You're on mute.
I'm not.
No, Chris. Okay,
now
Christine.
I can hear you.
Christine, go ahead.
One of my neighbours seems to be on the housing list, so principally because so she can be first with the news that one of our vacant lots is up and advertised. I don't think she's got any intention of moving. There's another case I know who's applied to be on the housing register. He owns a house in Ireland, and he's not even living with his mother on this site anymore. So there's two that I don't think should even be on the housing list. Are you going to prune some that haven't made any applications in a certain period of time?
Okay, so let's hold that one and say, so what's the sort of weeding out process, or is that changing? And Philip, are you live again?
Yeah, sorry about that. 2 points. I live in, as I think Nigel does, lives in supported housing. We have supported housing is for people over 60 with, as I understood it, with medical issues. As I've said previously, we have a bus driver living in Maudley House. He has no health issues because he has to take a medical every 12 months because he's over 55. And the other issue I would raise is there's 17,000 odd people on the housing list, and as the lady previously just said about people going on the housing list but not eligible and that. In Slough, where my late sister lived, you had to be on the electoral roll to get on the housing list. Well, and I think I'm right in saying you had to be on the electoral roll for 3 years before they would consider you on the housing list. Why can't we do that in Bristol? Because I know people who are on the housing list in Bristol and the housing list in Cardiff. Well, that's ridiculous. And so I think if you put the housing register, electoral register, if they're on the electoral register for 3 years, then they qualify for going on the housing list.
Okay, thank you.
So, as I say, this is not, it's supposed to be age restricted. We've got people here in their 50s with no health issues. We've got a woman who does yoga 3 times a week. She teaches yoga 3 times a week, and on a Sunday she walks to Pill.
Thank you. I think the essence of the point is clear. Tom, and then Donald, I think, if you may.
So Boyd's is under review as a process, and we're looking at how we can speed up that process, and there's something we're looking at the moment, and there's been additional investment been put into that team to help kind of reduce there's been a bit of a backlog, so that's been looked at very high up on the list. It's one of our kind of corporate targets as well that we report on publicly. If you're aware of cases where there might be suspected fraud, then do email in, and we'd pass it to the fraud team if there's a fraudulent application being made or anything like that. It's something we take very seriously. And on the last point, someone else is probably better placed to respond. We do have a local connection test currently, and there's no plans to remove that. But yeah, Donald may be better placed to answer that.
Donald.
Yeah, I was just going to reinforce what excuse me, what Tom has just said. You do have to have a local connection test, but Tom and I, by coincidence today, met with our fraud team, and we have an ongoing process which isn't publicised, but at some stage we will publicise it more than we are at the moment, and that is looking at how access to the register and access to a very valuable asset, a flat or a home, becomes available, because there is no doubt there is fraud in the city, and councillors are very keen to tackle that fraud because we want to ensure that the right people who are entitled to a home actually get it, and aren't prevented by others either manipulating the system or hiding their origins, or, as Philip has just said, applying here, there and everywhere else in the planet and hope that they'll land in the right place on one occasion. So, but there's no doubt fraud does exist. We have a responsibility to tackle it. We are putting the resources into it, and Councillor Reinhardt in particular has been stressing the need to release these properties when we identify them for people who genuinely need those properties.
Thanks, Donald. We're in our last 5 minutes or so. So, Pete, a brief observation or comment?
Yes, it's actually something triggered by Philip's comment there about the electoral register, and so it's a request to Liz Cheetham, if she's still with us. Can the next edition of Housing News have an article reminding people of the changes to the electoral roll that will disproportionately affect tenants? The requirement to have a passport or a driving licence, a form of visual ID, disenfranchises people like myself as an agoraphobic. I don't have a passport. As someone medically banned, I don't have a driving licence. I currently do not meet the requirements to vote in person at a polling station. There is an electoral disenfranchising going on where bus passes for the elderly, for example, are accepted. Bus passes for working age tenants are not accepted as proof of photographic ID for the purposes of voting. This change will disenfranchise tenants disproportionately. Can we have an article reminding people that they need to request, separately to being on the electoral roll, the identification that enables them to demonstrate who they are for the purposes of voting in local elections?
I think we'll take that as a thing, very valuable observation about how the world is changing, and hold it there for that one. Anything else that you want? That we've got a couple of minutes. Anything else that in relation to Liz's presentation around the allocations review, or are we content to say it all sounds like it's moving forwards?
Good.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it there for now. I'm not seeing any hands up. Sarah, do you want to deal with future meeting dates, which is our next item, and then we just got A or B?
Yes, so if the board agree, my suggestion is that we book in the next 3 dates so that we have them scheduled across the year, and I can include the dates in the minutes, but we've provisionally identified a date in April, July and October, avoiding anything that's in the civic diary at the moment. I can't promise that something won't come along at a later date, and avoiding school holidays. So if the board are happy, we'll look at planning out the year's worth of activity to make sure that we manage those dates well.
That looks like seeing sort of general nods from the people I can see on my screen, so that gives us a bit more certainty. We've got a question. We've got a question in the chat that somebody might want to just address. So any other business? I can't, unfortunately with Teams I can't see everybody, so I can't go around the screen very easily. So does anybody have anything else they'd like to raise at this point by way of any other business?
No.
No?
No.
Right, I'm not seeing any hands. In that case, oh, Tom, a physical hand rather than a virtual hand.
I think it was Eastfield Park, Councillor Denyer, but obviously we're working with the local ward councillors that represent the area on getting that addressed, as well as the query that's been raised tonight. I think just a quick plea for either now or just via email, if there are other topics that you're really keen to come to the Housing Management Board, do let us know. Do try and let us know in good time as well, if possible, rather than sort of say a week before, because it just gives us the time to make sure we prepare, as much information as possible to make sure we can have, a really good in-depth discussion.
I think if we've got a forwarded in terms of timings of the meetings, we can think about when is a good time in the cycle for the council for certain topics to come, if we know what the board would like to discuss. So that would be helpful as soon as possible on that front. In that case, our time is up. It is 8 o'clock. Thank you for your presentations, everybody. Thank you for your comments and questions. And I think there's some things there for colleagues to take away and reflect on or act on. And we might see each other again in April, if not before. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.